Hi everyone, welcome. And we're going to chat. You're going to listen. You're going to have time to ask questions. We'll keep some time at the end for questions. Uh, make those questions short, make them count. No long observations, please. I'm going to start off by asking Pratik to put on one slide at the beginning. Pratik, could you put the first slide on? There's a writer, Cory Doctorow, a science fiction writer, very recently posted this thread and about science fiction. I saw it actually thanks to Gautam. Do I follow Cory because Twitter is a disaster area these days. So it's very difficult to find anything. The next slide, please. And this is the one which we're talking about today, which is futures, right? And yeah, so what I'm going to start off with, we have kind of limited time, but we're talking about world building. Three people who have built beautiful worlds, wonderful worlds, look into the future. And I wanted to start this discussion, and this is for all of you, uh, by asking about the genesis of these particular books that we're talking about today. When did it start in your head? And perhaps you could start off actually one step earlier. What brought you into science fiction in a little bit, and then this book. So, George, do you want to take it?
Is it on? I think I wasn't thinking of science fiction as such, or I wanted to create the comic world with a whole bunch of collected stories, interconnected. But it wasn't really science fiction that was the focus or anything, but invariably you start imagining situations and futures. So that's how the Hala Hala world started. But it had very humble beginnings. It didn't. It. I was also not sure whether I could make so much of stuff I can imagine. Yes, but I think that's how it started.
And how did this book take shape?
The Dream Machine.
Yeah.
Ah. Because nobody's reading comics, right? So I'm trying to look for like some topics which can be, which can reach out to a wider audience or something. And I just bumped into this scientist in Paris, but AI scientist, and AI is like this hot topic and all. So I'm thinking, okay, how do I make a comic out of this? And this guy had some interesting perspectives. So that aligned with what I wanted to say, and that's pretty much how I got comfortable in this idea of collaborating with somebody on this future image. And I think rest of it is like it's there on people's minds, and it is kind of a marketing agenda. So try to question it, open it up, and put some little bit of humor or something in there. That was the attempt. Mm, yeah, I think when he said that we might run out of resources trying to attain AGI, it just struck me as wrong. I was like, okay, we all know this. We, we, we are actually saying this. We accept this, that, it's more important to like go and hunt for AGI, while we know that resources are going to run out. I was like, okay, there's a joke there only. But I don't know if many people are getting the joke because people are telling me this very seriously. Also, because the people who imagine, like we said in that quote, the people who imagine that future are probably not the guys who are going to run out of resources. So we accept that many people will run out of resources or like finish off their scene, and it's okay because we will get better suggestions on our iPad, and not much else. The self-driving car is not working, so, so I was like, okay, like, yeah, this is the narrative, and it's a whole lot of. Um, I'm from advertising, so it's a lot of the advertising gyan that we're buying. I just thought I'll make a a similar story from the other side. It's not very complex. Like before getting into the, I'm not an AI guy, but this guy, I had to study AI for some time to like do the book, and it at the end of it, it was exactly what I thought, or the image that I had of AI was what I learned also. So it's not that complex. You're making it very complex by like saying, all these things that people may not immediately connect or put it down to something. But it's kind of like simple if you boil it down. It's a big marketing thing. There are lots of like business things. There are lots of good things also with it. But do we like try it out in some area and see how it works, or do we just go all out? That was one of the questions. I mean, like if you're doing anything, we'll do that, right? Right now, we're just seeing the commercial push of and making it okay. I also noticed that in the last 2, 3 years, a lot of people told me that they've become much more friendly with AI. Like their image of AI has changed. That's because we're being fed a lot of AI with which we can play with. It's everyone's used it. It's become like this friendly little thing, and you turn to it for like fun. So, but we're only seeing like the surface use of it, not the larger or wider thing, and not what we are training it for in a larger perspective. So we went into all these areas in the book, and I think that kind of like a projection became very interesting for me. And Laurent, who I worked with, he teaches, and he's also a CEO of a company. So there is that business angle to it. So like I had to ask some uncomfortable questions to just to like get to the truth of it, and it is a good relationship and a good debate that we had. So I think that kind of projecting the future from what we know today, that's where the science fiction thing comes in for me. Like whatever we based it on is what is happening right now, and where it can lead to like is anybody's guess pretty much, and it's an educated guess. That's about it. But I thought it's relevant, and finally, it served the original purpose of like finding a topic that not just the comic people will like buy. Because there are so few comic book fans over there, so you can't really like make much out of that. So if you tag onto a topic like AI or something, then it's gone beyond the comic crowd really. So that's I mean, in a sense, as an artist, I'm thinking we can bring more people into the medium also like that. Like because the topic is interesting, you start like going into the medium, and then maybe you appreciate the medium of comics, and then you start looking for more stuff. So I thought overall it was like a nice thing.
Got it. By the way, show of hands, how many people attended the debate yesterday? Snap your fingers.
Say amen.
All right. How many of you thought that AI is a threat to humanity? Snap your fingers. How many of you think AI is the next messiah? Snap your fingers. It's like going to be great for us. We're all going to be fabulous because of AI. We had the wrong audience yesterday. Yeah, but Lavanya spoke yesterday about on the proposition which AI is a threat to humanity, and I think that we need to get a Terminator to go back and kill Clippy, the Microsoft thing, because I think that's the ancestor of all of this, right? That and spell check. You've got to kill those, and then we'll stop the advance of AI. But Lavanya, your journey into this. Sorry, Judge, you wanted to say something.
Oh, like, shouldn't make it look like we're pointing fingers just at AI. It's just something we have made. It's a button, like you can switch it off.
Yeah.
But there are people who are controlling the AI, and it's basically for cheaper and faster reproduction of things. And only the business world is like going so crazy.
None of
about
us
it.
are anti-technology.
Yeah.
What we're saying is follow the money. Who's controlling the data? Who's making money? What resources are being used to get that data together? Like the enormous consumption of power that will give you 3 random essays that you can put out there, which if you just went to a library and wrote for a little while, you could, right? I mean, they promised us flying cars and we get AI people with 8 fingers. So, but yeah, so this is not a Luddite anti-tech kind of panel. All of us love it, right? But yeah, your journey into sci-fi and then the book. Where did the book start?
So I have always been preoccupied with the confluence of technology and humanity, the way we feed into each other, and the way all technology, and I'm talking about even something as basic as fire, right? At one point, it was cutting edge technology for humanity. We have always been shaped by the tools that we shape, and the tools that we have created have in turn influenced us. Um, all fiction is speculative. We call this speculative fiction specifically as if there's this tremendous demarcation, but I do think, something that drew me into science fiction when I was much younger and starting out on my journey as a reader was the fact that all fiction is preoccupied with getting to the heart of what makes us human, of how we relate to each other and to the world around us. And to me, the power of science fiction has always lain in the fact that you can do this in worlds that are vastly removed from our own, that do not necessarily have the exact context of the baggage that we carry as humanity with a history of violence and bias and oppression. But we can mirror all of these things where potentially we are not constrained or influenced by our own historical biases going in when we engage with the text. And so it functions in this beautiful sort of a sandbox way, where you're presented with new civilizations or new cultures, um, and you get to witness who you truly are through the way you engage with them while you are reading. And when I'm writing, this is something that I enjoy doing as well. The wonderful, incredible Ursula Le Guin says, all science fiction is metaphor. And it is beautiful to think of it as a mirror to reality that is not constrained by the parameters of reality and the spaces we occupy in reality. So that's where I find myself as a science fiction writer. That's the perspective that I write from. Now, with regard to the book, it's got a bright pink donut on the cover. Okay, it is a whimsical book, but at the same time, this is a political book, and it's a book about food. Um, Over the years, food is such an innate part of all of our lives and all of our cultures. Um, but it is my belief, I think, that the history of humanity can be deeply paralleled as a history of food, right from the moment where we started cooking with fire. That fundamentally changed who we are, that pushed us towards forming civilizations the way we see them, right? When humanity took to agriculture and all of that. Now we're talking about the deep, distant past. But even today, food is this wonderful thing that is capable of uniting us because we all get together, hang out at the dinner table. We celebrate with lunches and dinners and drinks. There are traditional recipes handed down through the generations. And, when we engage with them, we're transcending time and space because we're connecting with a deep past. But at the same time, food is constrained by natural resources. The earth is heading towards an absolute resource catastrophe. We are already there. It's only going to get worse. Food divides us horrendously in this country right now, right? When you look at militant vegetarianism being enforced around India. So how is it that this fundamental thing that brings joy can also be so soul-crushing and divide us and split us apart? I was kind of preoccupied with this question, or this entire line of questioning around food. But this book truly started at a singular point when I was really ill. And the only thing I could taste and wanted to eat was rasam and rice. And it was my grandmother's rasam and rice specifically. And while I was being, nourished back to health with all the love and care that went into this rasam rice, another thought that struck me was, how is it that this is the world's best kept secret, right? Everybody knows their chicken tikka masalas, and everybody knows naan bread and chai tea. Absolutely nobody knows rasam rice, and I'm talking on a global scale. And this made me think about the politics of food in the popular imagination as well. What makes certain foods catch on? What are the power structures involved in policing culture, in policing, the elitism around food, who gets a say in foods that dominate the popular imagination? How does this affect marginalized voices? Who are the marginalized voices involved in food, right? I mean, so many celebrity chefs who are men, being men, but so many incredible cooks in our own homes, all of whom are predominantly women. So, who gets to determine this? So, effectively, it was just this trip down the rabbit hole into reading about food, into thinking about what food would look like in the future, into thinking about whether it would even be possible for food cultures to coexist, and how dominant and sort of marginalized cultures might clash. So that's where the book came from. Yeah.
You're talking about celebrity chefs and the women cooking at home. Just a few days ago, I read that I can't remember who said this, but it just there are cooks. I mean, wonderful cooks at home, women. The moment there's money to be made from it outside the home, the men come in. Right? So Gautam I've only just met him, though I've known of his work for a long time. And he was saying in the green room that he's a science fiction writer who's also a lawyer, but people know him the other way around. And he decided to tackle this by writing a book that is based on law and constitution. Stuff like that. Good move. But Gautam, before let's not get into the law bit except for the book, but how did you get in, and tell us about this book?
Thanks. No, so actually, it was funny you put up that Adrian Tchaikovsky tweet, because Tchaikovsky has written one novel with intelligent, sentient spiders. And
Not tweet, that was on Blue Sky.
Blue Sky, sorry, yeah.
Join Blue Sky, guys.
Blue
It's
Sky.
the new promised land.
The post on Blue Sky, yeah. So he's written one book on highly intelligent spiders, and the sequel being intelligent octopi. So I don't know if that's the future. It seems interesting, but yeah, it's a little alarming as well. But yeah, read his books. He's great. How did I get into science fiction as a child? One summer break, my parents got me a copy of Asimov's Foundation, one of the canonical texts. And what I loved about science fiction from the very beginning was that it changes, say, one or two things about the world that you take for granted, and then says, what if? And in doing that, it really casts a light on our world, ourselves, and the human condition. So one of my favorite stories, for example, is Asimov's Nightfall, where the premise is that you have a planet and there are 6 suns around that, right? So at any given time, there is at least one sun in the sky, except for once in 2,000 years when all the 6 suns are on the other side of the sky and there is nightfall. So generations pass by without people ever having seen the night or the stars, until that once in 2,000 years comes, and then how does civilization react to that when nobody's ever seen stars or the night? And so you think of something as basic as nightfall, which is such an integral part of our lives, and then think of how you would react if that wasn't the case. And that just tells you a lot about who we are, the things we take for granted, and what the world might look like without them. And I think science fiction can explore that so well through world building. So that was what drew me towards the genre as I read more and more. As a teenager, as the genre diversified, as Indian bookshops began to stock books beyond just the white male writers that we grew up seeing and reading. And yeah, that's what I think the genre does so well. As far as this book goes, well, it's interesting you brought up law, because before this book, I wrote 2 science fiction novels, The Wall and the Horizon, and people insisted on reading the law into them. So I'd meet someone and they'd say, that constitutional law point you made in that book was so interesting. Like, what constitutional law? There was no constitutional law point. But at some point I realized that you're never beating the allegations, so might as well lean into it. And so why not write a book that actually has very blatantly mixed law and science fiction, so nobody can get into that, and we can get into the actual science fiction of it. How it began in my head, so normally my work begins with one image and the ending. So I know the ending, and there's this one image in my head. And for this book, the image was of a man frozen in a vault, cryogenically frozen for ages, which is a very common science fiction trope. And then the question was, why is he frozen? And the answer that came to me was that he has been punished for a crime. The society which has invented the ability to preserve people in cryosleep for a very long time. And so instead of the death penalty, they have what they call reversible death penalty, or the sleep of death, where if you commit a grave crime, you are condemned to this cryosleep. And if evidence comes out years later that you were innocent, then you can always reverse that and bring the person back to life. And what does that do for ideas of criminal justice, ethics, revival, resurrection, death, and so on? That was one like core idea beginning from this image. And the other second one is I've always been really interested in the Paris Commune, which was this 3-month-long commune in 1871 in Paris when the workers and the people actually seized control and for 3 months actually ran like the city themselves in a completely egalitarian way. It was then ruthlessly suppressed by the army, but it is one of those enduring what ifs of history. What if they had survived and shown a way that you could live life without the power structures that govern us. So I mixed the Paris Commune in with this basic idea, and explored what if there was a surviving commune, and this person was the martyr who gave birth to that commune through the act that got him condemned. So that was the core premise, and that's where the book goes on from.
Right. So I had the privilege of reading all their books in the last couple of weeks, and I'm not just saying this because they asked me to, but buy the books. No, they really, it's been a long time since I read books in single sittings, right? Like, not, 1 hour, not speed reading. I read the entire book, every word of it, and finished it in like about 5-6 hours of continuous reading because they just caught hold of me. And they built convincing worlds with convincing arguments. Each of these books are very different books, right? They're different worlds, they're different worldviews. But something that sort of came out for me in different ways, but that there's deep love in them. These are all love stories to me as well, right? There is that love of food that is there out there. There's the quest for justice, the love for that. What is real justice, consequences, all of those things. I'm sorry to push you back into the law again. But yeah. And, George, who likes to present this cynical front to the world, this parodist and satirist who, digs people all over the place, is actually looking at the world with a lot of love and pissed with it. So, I mean, all cynics are really romantics, I've always thought, just very disappointed romantics. Yeah. So I think what I would like to know a little bit about is, so when I came to science fiction in my late teens, what I could find was golden age stuff, right? Mainly US authors, US and British authors, some Russian authors, not as many because I wasn't in Calcutta where you would get a lot more Russian authors coming in, but a whole lot of golden age stuff, Asimov, Clarke, etc. And it came as, and for a lot of people my age and older, if you were reading in English, you were largely reading white writers. There were very few Indians that one read, right? And post, The God of Small Things, things began to change. But you're younger, and who were the writers who were your role models, your community? Do you want to take that, Gautam? Let's do it the other way.
Yeah, so I think one thing is that growing up in India, specifically in an urban environment where English is a dominant language, is that it's very hybrid. So on the one hand, when you go to a bookshop and you look for science fiction, you will find your Asimovs and your Clarks and your Le Guins and Gene Wolfe, at least when I was a kid. And very early on, the first writers I admired Of course, Nightfall was a big inspiration, and Ursula Le Guin, I think, for everyone of us who's really thought about society and science fiction in terms of alternative societies, was a massive influence growing up. So there were those writers. More recently, I think the genre has expanded a lot more. It's become more open to voices that are not necessarily based in the UK and the US, and who come from other contexts. I think that one writer who writes both uh, fantasy and spec fic, but also writes memoirs. Her most recent book is an exchange of letters with a friend. Is Sophia Samadar, whose writing is just shot through with a certain kind of sensitivity towards the world, which really makes you want to be able to write like that. And I think that's the biggest compliment you can pay to another writer, that they make me want to write like them. So I would recommend her books, Winged Histories, Stranger in Alondria, those novels. I think she's been more recently a very formative influence on my work. And of course, it's as a writer, you end up reading a lot of stuff which is not necessarily in genre, but it's just a range of diverse work, both poetry and prose. So there are a lot of contemporary writers. Specifically, I've been really influenced by writers who straddle that boundary between politics and speculative fiction. So, for example, the Palestinian writer Emil Habibi, whose book Saeed the Pesoptimist is just like a brilliant exploration of how you can be embedded in this oppressive political context and still find it in you to make fun of it, even while you're in that position, and do it in this very light-hearted way, which then drives the point home. So I think those are some of the major influences on me.
So growing up, I read across genres. I still do. So my influences are from all over the place. And I have occupied entire eras being influenced by a certain school of thought or a certain school of writing. So this is difficult, but as far as being a science fiction reader goes, totally Ursula Le Guin in my formative years. What a phenomenal mind, so ahead of her time. Asimov was my first, I would say. So was Arthur C. Clarke, Philip K. Dick. All of these golden age guys. They expanded what it meant to be a reader, because you were experiencing new worlds and new futures, but they all felt so close to home. And I think I truly enjoyed discovering them, right? Because these were all new to me when I was 13 and 14. Later on, William Gibson. I think I've been influenced by a ton of magic realists, even though you will not find any magic realism in my work. There are still influences in the way they look at the world and the way they approach storytelling. A ton of poetry, again, across eras from all over the place. So yes, I have a ridiculous number of influences. Specifically, in terms of seeing myself in fiction for the first time, I must say Samit Basu. With the Game World trilogy and the Simmerkin Prophecies, to be able to see Indian names where before I had never seen any in science fiction. And I'm not talking magic realism, because we had that, but we did not have fantasy. And to be able to experience that, it was mind-blowing, because until that point, as a 13-year-old, I wandered around in school with a notebook writing this epic fantasy. And my characters were named Edmund and Lucy. Because if you were writing fantasy, they had to be named Edmund and Lucy. Yeah.
I wasn't so into the science. Arthur C. Clarke's, Philip K. Dick, Asimov. I read it more like, I need to know these things, because I like the society and sci-fi mixing kind of speculation that we do. So Huxley and Orwell just took over my head for a long time, and I thought if I could string a world between their realities, which rings true even today, and I'm still debating which one we are living in. If you take the excess information which makes us numb, or is it the control that makes us numb? So there are lots of debates about that. I think it's a nice mix of both that we are living in today, where it makes us passive also with the excess of all the entertainment that we get. We don't know, like right now, I really empathize with the people who are growing up today. Uh, how do you manage so much information? Like, how do you tackle it? Like, I respect them. I'm like, wow, like, these heads must be something else. But I think I was trying to make sense with these guys wrote these things in 1936 and 48, something like that. And can we look at it today, and how can we project something like that from the reality today? So that became like the goal. That's what I would hope to like do or dig at. But I think that's the kind of projection that I like. And also, I felt a lot of the science fiction relied um, unfairly on imagining unending resources, and it's always space travel, and like we're going here and there. Where do you get all that money or like material from? Like nobody asks those questions. So we like the fantasy ride of it, yes, but like how can I bring it more into our? That's also the Indian reality, right? When we think of something, we always think, okay, who's going to fund it? So it's like, okay, like can I build like a situation where I'm not projecting? It's like in our war movies, we are invariably glorifying war. So in these things, we are invariably holding up a lifestyle or a kind of like idea that we want our lives to go in, and it can only be possible with large corporations running the show. So we are actually saying that we want to hand over things to like these large corporations who will build all these rockets, and even AI. The race now is that only who will get to this AGI level of like AI, because right now what we have is the training LLM thing. We know the limits of it. That's all it can go. Whatever we train it on, it'll tell us. But can we now? There's funding in another way to like find that spark of intelligence. It's a race to like get that for some company. Once they get that, then they will be the guys who are holding the reins, and then they will decide what our speculative
And of course,
future
they
will
have
be.
our best interests at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was trying to imagine like a different way of looking at the whole thing,
Mhm.
because the science fiction for me it's like superhero comics, like there is that level which you have to like cross, like there is a superpower, there is like, so we take that premise for granted. I was trying to like break that with the comics in my superhero things also. I have a hero called Rashtraman who tries to break that, so that way. So yeah.
Right, we're going to need to get to Q&A, I've been told. So,
Yes, yes,
but I
yeah.
do have one very, just name names, all right?
You can
To
phrase
all-
it like a Q&A so that they think it's a...
Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do is take Samira's question, and thanks, Samir. I know you didn't ask a question. This is just for them. Yeah. So this is the formal start of the Q&A. Writers to watch coming up in broadly in sci-fi, and in as your current status as senior people with more than one book out, etc. Who are the writers you're looking at and saying they're good?
There's so many. Well, right over here we have Tashan, whose second book is also out and was launched here last year. And if you haven't read Tashan Mehta, I say please read Tashan Mehta ASAP. She is absolutely phenomenal. Um, yeah, I'm a huge Tashan fan.
Gautam, anyone you're watching, George?
Gautam Bhatia, Lavanya Lakshminarayan. Yeah, good.
I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like maybe not name names, but where you can find them. I think like online speculative fiction magazines are where I think you find writers whom you haven't come across before. So magazines like Clarkesworld for more science fiction, Uncanny magazine perhaps for more fantasy, Strange Horizons, which is a magazine I edit for SpecFic. Yeah, so I think online SpecFic magazines is where you'll find writers whom you haven't heard of yet and who are really good.
Yeah, zines are a good place. I mean, they've taken the place of the magazines that we never got here. All right, there was no stuff out here. But yeah, The room is yours, folks. Does anyone have any questions? I think there's someone strolling around with a mic. Or is there? Where the mic people? Can you just wave?
Can we have one of the mics from the stage?
Sure.
Because we're shut. So one of the volunteers will actually come
Take
and
mine.
collect it.
I'm dispensable.
Yeah, now we can open the floor, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand.
Brief questions, please. Don't expound because we would like to pass it around the room. Who's got the mic?
Yeah, me. Yeah.
Could you stand, please,
yeah.
so that we can know who we're talking to? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Sonelia. So, brief question. Suppose you have to write an apocalyptic scenario 500,000 years down the line. So, there's this distinction between hard SF and soft SF. So, as in, how do you go about it? As in, are there, what resources could you draw upon? So.
You want to wait 500,000 years for the apocalypse? Dear Lord. Such an optimist. But yeah, is that, sorry, the one bit I asked to say, is when you're asking your questions, either name one of them or say it's for all of them. Yeah. But would any of you like to take that?
So I think, we're already there. We don't have to wait 500,000 years. But if we make it, on the off chance that we make it, right, I do think that hard and soft SF are publishing labels, they're marketing labels. If you are writing hard SF, it is absolutely having an effect on society. And if you are writing social science fiction, which is not hard SF, it is absolutely gated by resources, right? So I think if we make it 500,000 years from now, the only use case in which we get there is that we fix all the rubbish that's wrong with our world right now. Because if we don't, we're sunk, right? So that's my take on, an apocalyptic scenario. I feel like if we do make it that far, it's probably humanity will have fixed ourselves, and it's possibly the earth sneezing at that point, right?
We have one more question at the back. The last. Okay. Yeah.
Hi guys, my question's for George. When you create a new comic, do you create the world and then build the characters and premise around it? Or do you create the characters and premise and then build the world around it?
Story first. All this has to serve the story. So the characters also come after the story. Where the story is what has to drive you. You have to be committed to the story and what it has to say. Once that is set, we choose the best scenario and the characters to serve the story or to deliver the story the best way. So I think it's what is needed for the story and what the story has to say. Then we can have fun with the designing, because a lot of people get lost with designing the character and carrying away. I also spent a lot of time building a world which I didn't need only. I didn't have anything. I was just stoned and I was thinking of this fantasy world or something. There was no intent for it. So that came later.
Thank you.
Yes, we have one last question. Yeah, in the last row again.
Yes, hi. This is a question for Gautam or for Lavanya. Regarding when you spoke about your early the writers that inspired you to coming into science fiction, and I love science fiction. I grew up reading that, and I wondered if you had any if you were ever exposed to Jayant Narlikar's work. He was the Indian writer. It was because for me, and maybe this reveals my age a bit too much, but it was his work that got me to Asimov, and then later on, I was just curious if in the writing circles as writers, if that anywhere sort of.
Yeah, I'll quickly answer and then pass it on. I came across him actually in translation in Hindi, interestingly enough, when I was a child. I didn't register the name, but I realized later on that it was Jayant Narlikar. And then in the Golank's volume of South Asian science fiction, interestingly, there is presently a collective effort to annotate his collected work, so I'm part of that. So we're doing it this month. So interesting timing of the question. Yeah.
Amazing, awesome, thank you.
Yes, and absolutely same, except it was in the opposite direction, right? Because I went from Asimov and all of these very global names from absolutely hegemonic UK, US markets. And it was much later that I discovered people at home were actually writing. And it was a revelation to me. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to wrap. They're all going to be available to sign, buy their books, and they will sign them. Right? Outside, the festival will need this room shortly, so we ask you to please not, mob the stage. As mobbable as these people are, little restraint and take it outside. But thank you for being a lovely audience. Thank you for making time amongst all the lovely stuff that was happening all around us at the festival and coming here. This is a full house. Thank you. And they're here because y'all are here because of them. So you're writers. Thank you, everyone.